Hey folks, it's showtime here on Tuesday, January 28th at about 5:30 p.m. I'm doing a update on the upcoming Venus Exalted. Venus is going to be exalted in Pisces for most of February. I almost said September. And I'm going to talk about the nature of Venus as it moves through different signs, why it's powerful in Pisces, the different nature of Venus in general as it moves through the signs, and especially recently as it's gone through Capricorn and then Aquarius and whatnot. So I think you'll really like this. This is really a time to transform this energy of Venus from its worldly nature to a more elevated nature. And I'm actually doing this YouTube update in conjunction with a larger web class that I'm also doing that you can register for. As you know, I've been doing quite a bit of these lately. It's a much more comprehensive web class where I go much more deeply into Venus energy and really explain this and also talk about Venus for all 12 signs and how it will be expressed for you throughout 2020, because in 2020 we have several important shifts with Venus. Of course, we have the exaltation now, but then it's also going to go retrograde in the in the spring, and then it moves through its difficult signs later in the year. So this is a great chance for you to understand these Venus cycles, particularly the retrograde cycles. Again, Venus goes retrograde about every 2 years. And so you really want to understand Venus, especially for the next few months. And I'm going to be talking about it for all 12 signs. Again, I'm going to do this on the web class. And what you'll learn on the web class is Venus 2020 for your sign and all 12 signs. This includes exalted transit in February, the retrograde cycle in the spring, and then Venus in difficulty and why. Certain sections of the sky are difficult as Venus moves mainly through Cancer, Leo, and Virgo, and why these are more difficult. And then the evolutionary process of Venus. How do we evolve the Venus energy from stimulation and sensuality through this kind of emotional desire and projection to a more higher and devotional state? So how do we do that? And also the functional nature of Venus and of all the planets. This is how we can really learn to analyze astrology charts correctly based on rulerships. Venus is different for each of the 12 signs. And so to really understand this functional nature of Venus, and then also remedies and practices to elevate Venus. These are the things we can do every day to really connect and elevate the Venus energy. So again, it's free to go to this. You can just type HTTP 2020venus.com. Look at that, 2020venus.com. And you go there. You can click yes, reserve my seat now. As it stands, as I'm recording this now, there are 3 times a day starting February 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. So again, that's Saturday, Sunday, and Monday upcoming. So over this upcoming weekend, 3 times each day. So you can find a time that'll work and then watch the web class. So again, besides that, if you're watching this later, there will be other dates available for you. And so anyway, this will be great. And today I want to go through the recent transits of Venus so that you can see where we've just been and where we're going. And let's get to that right now. So you see the chart now is with this, Venus has just gone through Capricorn and Aquarius. So when Venus goes through Capricorn and Aquarius, it's in the sign of a friend. Saturn is actually very friendly toward Venus because Saturn shows this, first of all, there's an elemental familiarity and connection because Venus rules the same elements as Saturn. Venus is sort of literally in its own element, earth and air. And so Venus is really, at least those Venus areas of life are really benefited by things that have to do with Earth, which is being practical, being humble, being present, and embodied, and air, which is being light, flexible, creative, curious, again, lighthearted. Think of relationships and what make relationships really work, whether romantic or not, just, friendships or whatever. First of all, we're practical. Earth is practical, which means the opposite of, or I should say, Earth is very similar to water. Earth and water are the feminine elements. Earth is practical, water is emotional. And then again, emotional. So in relationships, of course, we already have emotions. So it's better that we're much more practical with our lovers, and where we are humble and we appreciate what they do, rather than getting so emotional about everything and getting so emotionally charged. So Venus really supports things actually that are very practical. And practical things also mean like demonstrable. For example, demonstrable displays of affection where you, let's say, give someone something, or you do something, or you're present with them, you hug them, you touch them, these kinds of things. Very earth and grounded. Venus also appreciates things like air and the air sign. Air, which has to do with, again, ideas, flexible, lighthearted, humorous, fun. Let's have fun. Again, the other masculine element is fire. How about we get all fired up about desires, right? Doesn't work as well, right? When we get all fired up about other people, fire is very individualized. It's about me and what I get, what I want. Again, air is like, okay, we can, it's not so serious. It's not so, we can have fun. Let's just have fun. Isn't it fun to be dating? Like dating. Couples that stay together, they also have dates. They go on date night. They go out and have fun, right? So that's very air. So again, this is Venus in a very kind of worldly, mundane sense. In a very worldly and mundane sense, this is what we're, looking at. And this, these are two elements. This shows why Venus has a good nature as it goes through Capricorn and Aquarius, right? As it goes through Capricorn and Aquarius, Capricorn is very grounded, very practical. When Venus is in Capricorn, we actually take those things that we find that are beautiful, or let's say those people, and we're very humble. We appreciate what they do. We want to give. We want to commit. Again, notice this quality of Venus energy and wanting to make a commitment to something, to be there. Again, Earth, very practical in this regard. And then Venus also just went through Aquarius, which is, of course, air, and the air sign. The air sign is Aquarius. And again, Aquarius is where the Venus energy becomes more universalized, because Aquarius is air, but it's also about social constructs. It's about society. It's about large groups of people. It's about culture. And in this sense, Venus then makes a sort of commitment to things that are beneficial to everyone. And the Venus energy becomes more universalized, right? And so those two elements are the most stable. So I know what you're saying, but it's exalted in Pisces. It's water or Pisces. What about water? What about Pisces? Water, huh? I know. Chill out. I'm getting there. One thing to understand, this is why exalted, you've heard me say many times probably, except for those who don't notice, but exalted is a different thing. It's like a wild card. It gives a very high capacity, but it's also unpredictable. With Venus especially, Venus being exalted in this water sign, it can be quite unpredictable because Venus is literally kind of out of its element, right? Because its element is water, or I'm sorry, is earth and air, but the exaltation is water. You know, the similar thing is with Mars, because Mars rules fire and water, and it's exalted in an earth sign. Again, you can see this quite a bit with with exalted. It's not as direct because it shows a level or a quality of the planet that's kind of otherworldly, sort of beyond this world. And as such, it represents something that is sometimes hard to contain. And it can be quite disruptive. It could be a kind of eccentric, wild nature. And what I talked about, even when I was saying that I'm going to describe in great detail on the web class, you know, and I said I was going to describe those things on the web class, especially you could see based on the functional nature of Venus. This functional nature really shows how to understand this exalted placement for each of the 12 signs. This exalted Venus is totally different for Capricorn, where it's the ruler of the 5th and 10th house and a very powerful dharmic planet, than it is for, let's say, Leo, where it's the 3rd and 10th lord exalted in the 8th house. That's very different. In fact, this exalted Venus, for the signs where it's a functional malefic, can be very disruptive, which can make for like unreal desires and things that create a lot of problems. Now, again, but because it's a problem that comes from an exalted planet, the problem itself is to bring about higher awareness. So it doesn't mean it's bad or wrong. Again, we always have to look at things that way. But this is how you read the subtleties of these things. This is how astrology really works on the subtle level. This is how it works beyond this thing of good or bad. But Venus is exalted, so that's good, right? Well, now you're saying it does this other thing, so that's bad. So which is it, good or bad? Again, the typical useless, you know, idea that people have when they haven't studied, because everything is a range. But this is one of the most important things to help you understand how planets operate in reality. In reality, you have to definitely understand the functional nature of each planet. Those are the things that I'm going to talk about in the web class that you can sign up for. And again, if you just joined, I just put a link there for that web class, and this this nature of when Venus goes into that higher realm of Pisces. Again, it's a universal energy. So regardless of whether it's a functional benefic or malefic, it's going to have a common purpose, at least as far as what it's trying to do. And, you know, Venus is the planet of trying to elevate our worldly desires towards something that is otherworldly. So you can see here, I'm recording this on January 28th. And by the way, if you look up in the sky as you're watching this now, we have an exact Venus, this exact Moon-Venus conjunction. Moon-Venus looks beautiful in the sky. We have this Shiva moon and Venus up there shining bright as a diamond. I could see it outside my window. I got a beautiful western horizon every night, and I can look up and see it. It's so gorgeous. And so that Moon Venus are just beautiful in the sky right now. And so you could see here on the 29th, Moon goes into Pisces. Now, and then by February 2nd, I'm going to put this for a couple hours. By February 2nd, in the middle of the day, Venus goes into Pisces. And it's in Pisces until February 28th. So it's pretty much in Pisces for all of February. It's going to be this exalted Venus, right? And, it leaves February 28th. So we have Venus exalted in Pisces during that time. So here's one of the main things about Venus to understand is this highest level of Venus is to, again, elevate our desires. Venus is really the planet. It's the energy in you that wants to experience beauty, wants to enjoy life, to make it real simple. Venus brings happiness, pleasure, enjoyment, and you want to enjoy life. You want to enjoy life first for yourself, then you want to enjoy it with others, then you want to universalize it and share it. And then eventually you want to not have it refer to anything in this world, but just be a quality of consciousness itself. That's the highest. And so Venus, as in Pisces, is its highest elevated state, at least naturally. This is the way you can see all the exalted planets. They're really archetypes where they certainly operate that way when they're in that sign. But even if they're not in that sign, the exaltation point teaches us about the highest quality of the planet. Because those exaltation points are mentioned in the chapters on planets. So it's a quality of the planet that is shown by Pisces and Venus. Just like it's a quality of Mars that the exaltation point is Capricorn. There's something about Capricorn which takes Mars to the next level, beyond even this Earth. There's something about Pisces that takes Venus beyond. And so what is that? Well, again, we can just look and see that Venus is literally our desires. And our desire to enjoy life, like I said, and then share it with others, and then elevate beyond that. And like all the planets, we experience and we evolve consciousness through body, mind, and spirit. Body, mind, and spirit are directly related to the three gunas. In Sankhya philosophy, body is also related to tamas, or for myself. First, we experience these planetary energies in our body, literally our physical body. And Venus, operating through the physical body, brings the desire for pleasure, just for myself, my personal pleasure. Like, I want to eat some candy because I like the way it tastes. That has nothing to do with any other person in my life or anything else. I just want that pleasure. I want to eat some ice cream because it tastes good and I want to experience that pleasure. That's Venus just for myself. But the next level of Venus beyond just personal pleasure is something like love with another person, like desire and happiness with another person. I call it happiness. So there's pleasure, which is just for me. Happiness is with another person. We want to be happy with another person. Now, of course, the next level, that happiness also shows, it also goes down. So we can be happy when we have a certain amount of pleasure. But pleasure and happiness are different, because sometimes pleasure doesn't necessarily lead to happiness, especially later. But happiness is what we want to share with another person. So Venus is actually the energy that gets us involved with another person more than anything else. It's the planet that gets us involved with other people. And we want to elevate our pleasure, because if it's just pleasure for me, it's not so enjoyable. But if I can share that with someone else, especially someone that I love, then my pleasure even gets magnified. My pleasure gets magnified. Think of something like, for example, sexuality. Of course, without getting too graphic, we can experience some of that just by ourselves in the form of pleasure. But when we share it, now it becomes sexuality, and it becomes a whole other thing. It's this whole emotion, this whole feeling, this whole connection. And of course, even the pleasure itself gets magnified. but it also becomes harder to do. As things evolve, they also get more complicated. There's a direct correlation between the amount of, let's say, pleasure and happiness and how much more work you have to do to attain it. You don't have to work very hard to experience pleasure. You can buy a bag of M&Ms if you like them and eat them and experience pleasure. But you can't just experience the thing that you get with another person in a relationship, that subtle happiness, joy that you get in a relationship with another person who you love and who you care about, and sharing pleasure with them is much harder than buying a bag of M&Ms and eating it, or buying some ice cream and eating it. But there's a definite correlation, as we know. And as an evolutionary principle, Venus is actually the energy that teaches you this, that teaches you how to get along with other people. Why? Because you want to experience that more refined form of pleasure. Because you want to. You want the pleasure, and you want to evolve the pleasure beyond that to something that's happiness. So what do? What happens? You know that the only way to actually experience that high level of happiness and to elevate your pleasure beyond just being by yourself and pleasing yourself with food or something else sensual, what you need to do is then be nice and kind and compromising and sharing. Because you know that if you want to have that higher level of pleasure, you have to do it with someone else's permission and consent. And there's a mutual respect. There's a mutuality. Let's say in a relationship where there's sexuality and there's joy and pleasure, you can't take it. It has to be an agreement. So Venus uses the promise of pleasure and happiness to teach us the lesson. This is what all the planets do, by the way. Venus, it's very easy to see it, but you should realize that the reason we do it is because of the promise of pleasure and happiness. That's why we stay in certain relationships and not in others. Because this is why, especially like in romantic relationships or something, there always has to be some kind of physical sexual attraction or something, or else we won't do it. Because there's that attractiveness that's drawing us to it. But then there's a level above that. Now that middle one is rajasic. So the pleasure one is tamasic, just for the body and for me. The one with the other person is rajasic. I get this, you get that, we're sharing. And in that example, my happiness has to come through your consent. I can't experience the pleasure that I want unless you share it with me. And so this is, again, why Venus is the planet and the planetary force in you that navigates these adult interactions with two equals. It's literally two equals who have mutual desires, and they can only fulfill those desires with the other person and with their consent and with their engagement. So again, you can see sexuality very easily, but any kind of relationship happiness, but it's also, Venus has a lot to do with business partnerships. And as you know, if you've ever been in a relationship that works, it has a quality of a business agreement with it. It's an agreement more than anything. Relationships work mainly because of the agreement. That's why there's all kinds of relationships. And again, notice what I said at the beginning about Venus energy. It really benefits because of things that are practical, things that are flexible, earth, air, not so emotional. What kind of agreements do you have when there's all this emotion? The agreements are usually very hard to figure. They need to be tangible, practical, measurable. You need to know what the other person expects. You need to be flexible when it doesn't go right. You need to have some ability to adjust, not take it all too seriously so you can laugh at yourself. All these things are very good in a worldly sense for those two human beings trying to fulfill mutual desires with each other. That's very much the rajasic emotional quality of Venus. But then there's the Sattvic, the highest, most elevated, which is beyond the pleasure or the happiness with the other person. And that higher quality of Venus doesn't require another person, doesn't require, obviously, a bag of candy. It's a connection to the source itself. Because the thing that you're trying to get with the candy or the other person is a connection to bliss itself, your nature. The other person or the candy or the this or that is just the best thing you've come up with yet in order to get it. That's the best you've come up with. And it's limited. You get it for a while, but then you got to work to maintain it. And it's something external that, again, like you're not in control. It's something that you're trying to do to get something back. It's this transaction. And it brings up a whole bunch of other things. But but you do all of that because doing all that stuff connects you to the essence of a part of you. Because you get to connect to that part of yourself that is beautiful, that wants to enjoy life, that wants to connect with the bliss. The spiritual principle beyond the feeling, the emotion, or the sensual experience. There's a sensual experience, the emotion, and then the quality of consciousness, which is the Sattvic one, is like that bliss of the soul. So the Sattvic is the bliss of the soul, which is the source of it all. So when we connect with things like, let's say like an exalted planet, which represents something like the Sattva guna, not just an exalted planet, a planet in its own sign is also very much the Sattvic guna. But what we're doing is we're connecting to the essence of the thing, the essence. The essence doesn't mean the feeling. It doesn't mean the emotion. Emotions and feelings are not essential. They're a byproduct of something. You get an emotion because of some experience, but an experience is not essential. It's not the essential thing. The essential thing means the source. So in Venus, so you want to understand Venus in Pisces is a connection to its ascent to the essential bliss of the soul. That's not dependent upon a person or an experience. It's your true nature. And the best example that I've heard to explain it very succinctly was by my guru Amma several years ago made this statement. And she said in one of her satsangs, she said, yes, it's okay to be happy. We're all here to be happy. I want everyone to be happy. There's nothing wrong with happiness. I want you to be happy in your marriage and in your jobs. You're supposed to live a happy life. We're all supposed to live a happy life. But because your nature is pure happiness, but we're supposed to be happy for no reason. Happy for no reason. She said, because your essential nature is happiness. And if you have a reason to be happy, then you're going to have 1,000 reasons to be unhappy. We have a reason to be happy, and that reason conjures up, like if and when we have that thing, if and when we have that thing that makes us happy, then we're okay. But then again, most of the time we don't have it. So then we're looking for it. We're worried about it. We have it. We're afraid we're going to lose it. There's just it creates as much stress as anything else. So that, happiness for no reason is very much a sort of paradigm of Venus in Pisces. And so, again, just to say again, I am doing this web class here that you could check out, and it's going to be on no, let me see here. Sorry, right here. And it's going to be, again, all you need to do is go to that web address, 2020venus.com. And I'm going to go over these things for each of the 12 signs. Again, so I'm going to go over that functional nature like I talked about earlier, and how this happiness for no reason idea, how each of the 12 signs experience that based on its functional nature. Again, the principle is universal. We all have a relationship to happiness, and we all want to be happy for no reason. But certain signs, again, it's harder because that Venus energy brings up something that's different. Certain ones find that quality much more easy to work with, while others find it more difficult. And especially wherever that sign of Pisces is as well, winds up being important in the mix. And these things are really important as we go forward in 2020, because, as I said before, we not only have this exalted right now. Again, if we run this through, we see now as we go and we get into May, especially when Venus goes into Taurus, now we're going to see Venus hits a retrograde cycle. You see it starts to slow down. Venus gets really bright, and then it turns retrograde right around here. Where is it? Right there it is. So then Venus turns retrograde in the middle of May. That's going to be retrograde for like 6 weeks into June, and then it covers all this ground in Taurus. So wherever Taurus is for you, wherever the sign of Taurus is, so that was May 13th until June 24th. So you see that's all in Taurus. So wherever Taurus is for you, you're going to get Venus retrograde there. So again, that's also a huge thing that's going to be going on this year. And so there's a lot of stuff going on this year in 2020. So I see people have a few questions here. I might go and just look down a few. Astro Boss says, I love that about Venus and Pisces is why I can't go without a partnership for too long. Yeah, and we wind up being, this is why we wind up, the external is just to reflect back to the internal. And it's why we have so many attachments and projections in relationships, in romantic relationships, because what we typically do is we tie up all of our happiness in other people. This is why Venus is really the indicator of other people. And again, notice how much your life revolves around other people. And it's easy to say, well, of course, it revolves around other people. It's like our whole life revolves around other people and wanting them to like us, wanting people to like us, to enjoy life, to be nice to us, to be friendly, or whatever it is, popular and all this stuff. So much of it is Venus. Notice, we're so attached to, the people in our life that we've been engaged in. And, and particularly those romantic involvements, again, what we do is we project so much onto them because we want that to work out, because that's like our lifeline to happiness. Like, without you, I'm not happy. This is why we also get into this whole thing about, again, this projection, and we get into this whole thing about, well, you didn't make me happy. Well, you did this to me. You made me sad. Nobody can make you sad, and nobody can make you happy. No one is making you anything. You are guilty of all of it. You're responsible for all of it. Now I'm turning into Sam, the meanie. Sam, the mean one. No one is responsible for your emotions and how you feel in relationships. Now, people say, well, what about if you beat somebody? Again, notwithstanding all that, in those kinds of situations, when people get into abusive relationships, often It's because they've overlooked all of the signs, and they projected all of this onto the other person because something about that other person looked familiar to what they were used to. And they thought, this is what I need to be happy. And yes, it's often twisted and sick and crazy. And we need to evolve that. And if we wind up in toxic relationships, which we all have had, we all have done, we've all been the toxic partner. Yes, you have been the toxic partner of someone else before. You have been their toxic partner that they think about when they're like, oh God, at least I'll never do that again. And they're thinking about you. I know, I'm terrible. No, but because we become really stupid when we project onto the other person. And by the way, what do you think is the sign of projection? What do you think is the biggest sign of projection? If you said Pisces, you'd be right. Pisces, you'd be right. And again, this is the thing to understand about Exalted. Exalted, it doesn't necessarily mean, oh, this is great. This is the best. It's good. You should never judge things as good or bad, ever. Don't judge them as good or bad. It's just an energy. And this energy of Venus and Pisces means it's like Maya, it's the highest potential. And again, with the highest potential is also the highest potential to go sort of crazy. But when it goes crazy, it's to teach us and show us something, because sometimes we can't go crazy. We don't see what we're doing until something goes absolutely bonkers. And then we see it and then we're like, oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. So I'll tell you a few things that I see when someone has Venus in, when people have Venus in Pisces. Ruth Oak said, toxic is just that projection reflected. Yeah, it is. I see this all the time where I'll tell you this, because I do a lot of readings. I've probably done 200 readings a year for 15 years. I see all the stuff people say. And how many times do you think when I do a reading with someone and I'll see the note that they'll give me, and they'll talk about how I'm just getting out of a toxic relationship, or why do I always have these toxic relationships? And I look at their chart and I look at them and I'm like, boy, talk about toxic partner. And again, I'm not blaming anyone. I don't use that kind of language or even think in that way as far as the ways I see it. I'm talking about the things in people's heads. The way people see this stuff. I don't see people as toxic or relationship as toxic. All of it is toxic. There's nothing but toxicity in our ego. Our ego is toxic. And it interacts with another one because there's needs and desires and projections and darkness and fear and lying, where we're not totally honest, and we're political and we're corrupt and we're projecting because we want something, yet we think the whole thing is toxic on some level. Again, I'm not saying it's bad, but I just mean the whole interaction, because you have two people who don't really who don't know themselves very well. And they probably haven't examined their own ego, their own projections, their own stuff. They're still working through all their stuff. They find another person, and they project that onto them, and the other person's doing the same thing. So again, it's a miracle there's ever anything that's not toxic half the time. As far as once people start to know each other. Once we really get to know each other underneath all the attachment, underneath all the projections, because again, notice what first happens. We first get in a relationship and we meet someone, and it's like, okay, finally someone who I am attracted enough to, who I like, let's be honest, want to have sex with, or I'm attracted to, and they seem reasonable enough. I get along with them well enough to want to be intimate. That in itself is so hard to find. Then it's like, okay, so I'll deal with almost anything because I want the connection. So we start to convince ourselves that, oh, I'm sure it'll all be okay. Oh, okay. Because we want the connection. We want to feel the connection to our bliss. This is what I was talking about. Look at these things objectively. Notice how these things work out. We're barely trying to find anybody that we're even attracted to, that we can barely maybe get along with. And then we just talk ourselves into the fact that, okay, even though hardly nothing is right here, even though there's all these warning signs, I'm going to ignore all that because right now I want this connection. I want to connect with my bliss. I want to connect with sex and with this accommodation, compromising. I want to get that Venus thing going. I want to have it going. I want to get together with another person and try to enjoy things and share and magnify my pleasure beyond just with myself. And even though 85% of it is awful, 15% of the time we really can do it. And that'll be enough to keep people going. This is why people stay in these relationships. Even if it's, again, 75% of the time it's awful, but 25% of the time it's okay. It's like, all right, that's enough. I'll just try to live with the rest of it because at least 25% of the time when I'm around this person, I get to connect with some happiness. Because other than that, I don't have much happiness. I have a little bit of pleasure, but not much happiness. And once in a while, that happiness connects me to the bliss of the soul. All right, I'm sold. He's the one. And then all they do is just want to change all the stuff that's wrong. Again, because we're stuck in some outer form. When its essence is something that's transcendent. It's beyond all of this. That's the essence. Now, again, when we connect to the essence, it makes all of the other stuff even much more tolerable, especially if we're with someone else who wants to try to connect to the essence. And we can elevate that. Jeff Poole, yes, Astro Boss. Oh, yeah, the connection to source is so much better. Oh, here it is. Oh, he was talking about this. I thought Jeff was calling me Astro Boss. Made my Venus feel good. No. What did she say? Problem with Venus and Pisces is we can end up not wanting to get out of the celibacy. Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if that's a problem. But so this is how the evolutionary process goes. And this is often how relationships wind up being. And people then feel like they're the ones who are, again, this is why I said at the beginning, understand you're doing the compromise because you want to do it, because you want the connection. Even if it's once in a while, you want to still have it sometime. And so we tolerate these other things. And then we got to see how much of that we're willing to tolerate and how distracting it might be and all like that. So again, this Venus in Pisces is really to elevate and take our nature beyond and to bring about that happiness for no reason. I think this is one of the most beautiful ways to understand Venus in Pisces, to understand Venus in general, not just in Pisces. Again, the exaltation points are just archetypes primarily. You can see them that way. So when we evaluate the exalted sign of a planet, it gives us insight into that planet's nature, that actually Venus, as the planet of happiness, is trying to universalize that happiness into something that's not of this world, so that we're happy for no reason. We just connect to the bliss of the soul. And then it just becomes devotion. We become devoted to just the sheer beauty of life. The sheer beauty of life. It doesn't need to have some outer form, some person, and some experience in order for us to connect with it. Because then the experience also becomes an attachment and a hindrance and an illusion. We get hypnotized by the illusion, and the real problem is we actually literally think that our happiness is coming from that person or that experience. So we think they're the source. Again, this is the biggest problem with relationships. We lose ourself literally, and we think, no, my happiness, you're responsible now for my happiness, and of course, my sadness. So then you did this to me. You made me unhappy. Look at what you did to me. You did to me, did to me. Victim, victim, victim. In this toxic relationship, victim. It's like, again, it's very easy. And how much of our life revolves around this stuff? And again, not even just with romantic partners, but just with all the people in our life. And Venus is the one that navigates all these relationships and sees whether or not it's worth it, or what it's worth, or whether we're getting as valued or valuable, what the exchange of value is, and how connected it is to something pure. So it's a very deep energy, and it's a very transformative thing. So I'll look here and see if I want to answer a few questions. Many times Casey Scott is here. Hey, Casey, good to see you. Jeff Poole is here also. Got some students here. And people want to talk about everything in the world. Bernie Sanders. Okay. So this is a question that I'll at least look at. Not sure if you address this. How does this apply if I have Venus and Pisces in the D9 in the 9th house? Well, you would read the Navamsha chart, of course. And so when you're reading the Navamsha chart, you would see its exaltation there. And so, yes, how you would do it is you would apply it to the D9. That's what you do. So I'm not going to teach people how to read the D9 on this chart. So that's, but yeah, this is a universal, this is a universal insight that I'm sharing here. You are an astro boss, Sam. Totally. Thank you. That's what I wanted. That's what makes me happy, my Venus. No, so Astro, this is a good question. Can you share your thoughts on how women and men differ with Venus expression? Yeah, I'll share this part of it, of course, because women are more defined by their feminine planets, by their nature. Women by nature are defined more by the feminine planets, meaning through their own self identity. They identify more with those traits. Even if they have stronger masculine nature, they will identify themselves more with their feminine planets, Venus and the moon, which means, let's say you have a woman with a really powerful Mars, really powerful sun. So she's great in her work and all this, and she's got a lot of masculine energy, even more than most men. That's great. But the way she's still going to feel about herself is going to have more to do with the feminine planets. She's still going to identify herself more related to her capacity to feel through Venus, and her capacity through the moon, and her capacity to enjoy through Venus. So again, with men, they identify more with those masculine planets. So a man who has the powerful Mars and the powerful sun, they're actually going to identify a lot more with those things, and more as a matter of their identity. They're like, yes, I'm this Mars sun person. And they're not going to care so much maybe if their moon, Venus aren't as developed, because they're not as identified themselves with those energies. The first thing to say. And that kind of encapsulates a lot of the differences, is that just as a matter of identity, you will find that again, women identify more with those feminine planets. Men also obviously have them, meant to be very sensitive, very creative, and have this strong capacity to enjoy. But often if you see that men have, let's say that their feminine planets and their feminine energy is much more prominent, let's say, than their masculine planets, it creates a bit of an identity, a bit of an identity crisis at times. Because again, in a man's body, they're going to identify themselves more with their masculine virtues. And it'll be reinforced by the opposite. Again, it's not just, but it'll be reinforced by how women respond to them as well. And this whole thing, this is what we're doing in relationships. We're trying to experience our gender and the opposite person reflects back to, they basically reflect it back to us. Women want men to act like men. Men want women to act like women. And it's very simple, but it's actually really true. These are ancient teachings that go beyond modern, like, oh, what about the women's movement or whatever, or sensitive men, meant to be sensitive to, all of that. It doesn't negate any of that. Of course, we're a mixture of things. But I mean, when we get in a romantic relationship, for example, in an engagement like that, these are the things that are actually getting tested more than anything. So, again, I would say it like this, that when you would see women who have very developed feminine planets, they have more of a capacity to enjoy them, just like the man who has the really powerful masculine planets, because it's not only like they're good at this thing, but it's like their identity revolves around it. Like a woman who is great at her job and like that, she can enjoy that to some extent, but if she doesn't connect with her feminine energies, there will be a lack of fulfillment that she feels around that area of life. She'll get in relationships maybe with all this masculine energy and still wonder why she's the one in charge. Why isn't she being taken care of? Or why doesn't she get men why is it hard for her to feel receptive and to feel that beauty and to be empowered through her capacity to be receptive? A woman's going to feel that no matter how strong her masculine planets are. So when a woman has really powerful moon and Venus, like we see in Pisces and in those feminine signs, again, some of this is very easy to see. You can just look at the gender, like the feminine planets and feminine signs. They're going to have that capacity to be receptive. And for a woman, that's going to help them connect with their heart and help them receive happiness. Because women want to be received. They're empowered. Their feminine part, feminine energy is empowered through the capacity to be receptive. Masculine energy is empowered through the power to give and to assert and to go through things. So this is just a basic principle of masculine and feminine, but it's good to bring up here with Venus, exalted in Pisces, because you can see that. And look at where Moon is exalted, Taurus. These are two of the most feminine signs. Of course, Jupiter is also exalted in a feminine sign, and so is Virgo. So you see, and so is Mars. So it's interesting how a lot of the planets are exalted in feminine signs because they're more reflective. But so that's a good question. But again, what happens with this in a very universal way, men also love to connect to their heart. Men love to connect to their creativity. And what's an easy way for them to do it? With women. Women really, again, this is how we're teachers of each other. Women generate something very naturally. It doesn't matter if the woman is a real go-getter. Women still generate something much more naturally that men just don't generate very easily. That kind of refinement and that kind of loyalty to the heart and that placing an emphasis on those connections and that very beautiful devotional quality that women generate very naturally that men don't. And men are like, wow. The best way women teach men is to just be women. Don't try to fight with men about how they're not being a good man. Be a woman and you'll teach the man. That's the best way. By the way, this isn't just me, stuff I'm making up. I've watched my guru Amma. Again, I've learned so much from my guru Amma. This is a woman who is surrounded by all these men, all these swamis, nothing but men all around her. And I even watched the way she treats men and the way she treats women as devotees. She very rarely scolds men. She doesn't scold men or yell at men or like get harsh like that, because it's not because she's afraid of them or anything, but she knows that you don't usually get very far doing that. Because when you do that or you take a man on like that, you're just going to get an argument, because men love to argue. Go ahead and do that, and a man will just be like, well, no, it's not like that. No. Instead, what you do to teach a man, because they're hard-headed, they think they're right, they think they know it all. What you do, you don't try to engage on that level. You teach by example. You teach by being the thing, by being that feminine icon, that is loving and devoted no matter what. Because women can do that. Men can't. And by doing that, the man will wind up feeling bad. And he will feel ashamed of himself, like he should, because he's disconnected from his heart and she's connected to her heart and he's being an idiot. And as long as if she's telling him he's being an idiot, he's just going to keep being more of an idiot and keep defending himself. But if he acts like an idiot and she just stays devoted and loving and kind, he'll feel like a total idiot at some point. And if he doesn't, then the woman should leave. Anyway, I'm kind of going off a little bit. I know women love to argue too. I'm not going to get this derailed. I'm just speaking extemporaneously right now. This will probably get a bunch of people bashing me, but I don't really care. But by the way, women also learn that thing that men generate very easily. Women inherently have a kind of inherently weak identity or weak self-image, where it's hard for them to like keep that like, okay, this is me and this is what I'm doing and I'm motivated and because their energy is much more diffuse. It's much more based on the people around them, and their identity is much less fixed. It's very fluid. You know, I heard the thing, one of the female mentors that I know, that they'll say, so who are you? And they're like, well, I'm whoever I need to be around the people I'm around and whatever the situation needs. That's who I am. Who am I? I'm the one who's trying to make sure everything's okay and everybody's all right. That's who I am. And it's kind of like women are always losing themselves in the situation or the other person. Again, and now, you know, women have to be careful not to blame men for that or blame everybody for it. That's their nature. That's their power. But they learn from men, especially men that are very masculine. Again, when a man is fully embodied in his masculine, they're like, wow, how do you generate that? How do you like, you're right. You're not letting everybody define you. You're not letting, when people criticize you, you know, they're full of crap and you still keep going and you da. Whereas women, it's much harder to take all that because somebody criticizes them or does this and they're like, oh, okay, all right, I'll stop. And their energy is not as fixed. Again, and this is the nature of the moon Venus as well. This is why, because they're more accommodating and whatnot. So how do they learn it naturally? The easiest way is to be around a man who's very masculine. And then they're like, wow, okay, yep, check that out. He just does this naturally. Incredible. Now, why does he do it when I want him to change? They love that you do it, but then they love when they try to change you, you still don't change. Like, wow, I love this guy is such a masculine man. I love how he doesn't let other people define him and knock him off course. But now I want to define him and knock him off course, and it's not working on me either. Anyway, all right. So this is the conversational portion of tonight's broadcast. So anyway, of course, I'm speaking in very general terms and in terms of archetypal masculine and feminine, of course. But these things are generally true. You've done as many readings as I've done over the years. I'm telling you, pretty much every relationship, and again, there are gay relationships and whatnot, and they're a little more fluid, but pretty much all relationships come down to the genders, the gender identity. Who's the dominant, who's leading, who's not, is the man in the initiating role, the woman in the receptive role. It's pretty much the same scenario every time. And again, people that haven't done this, they're like, oh, no, I think it's this and that. We have all these new age ideas that, this old outdated stuff isn't true anymore because now we're more sophisticated and gender fluidity and all this. It's still the same principles, masculine and feminine energy interacting. Yes, it gets more fluid with other things, but even that still comes down to the same principles interacting. Most relationships that have a man and a woman, this is always the way the circuit is supposed to run. And this is always, you see how well that's flowing. And then you fill in the specifics. Of course, there's 1,000 specifics in there, but the specifics are less important. just like everything else, these huge truths, these big universal principles and truths are usually like 90% of the equation. And then the 10% of, yeah, it's because, you know, this thing with your mother, or you are this way, or that thing, or da 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 da. Then you can fill in the gaps of the specifics, but here's the thing. When the masculine feminine flow is right, it can pretty much sustain and withstand anything else. When that's flowing right, that's just what feels right. Then you can fight, you can do this, you can do that, and it's still, the people are in their role. They're receiving the energy they want, or they're giving the energy and it's being reflected back the way they want. It's very simple paradigm when you look at relationships and how the masculine and feminine engage with each other. So you can see this in your own life. You ever just been around people that, and again, if I were to see the charts, I would know exactly, here's why. Why, even though you had nothing in common with this person and they were this or that, just when you got around them, something felt like, wow, I could just be myself, and just something about the way he acted. I was just totally relaxed and myself and felt so da-da and cherished, and he da-da-da-da-da. You would see that astrologically in the thing I'm talking about. And then other times, no matter what, it just always feels like, I would see that's not working. Where the masculine and feminine is like the gears are stuck. So, all right. So, I'm going to wrap this up here. And someone said, please do people with weak Venus. I need help. I'm going to talk about remedies and stuff like that on the web class that I'm talking about. Look, the other thing you should understand is everybody's Venus is weak. Everybody's everything is weak to some extent. You shouldn't think, oh, this is strong, so I don't need help. We all need help. We all need all the help. Sorry. And I include myself in all this. We all need help. And especially in relationships and stuff. If it's not the Venus, it's the seventh Lord. It's the this, it's the that. We're hardwired and programmed to just make a mess of relationships, especially full of projections. Even if we have a strong Venus is sometimes worse than a weak one, because a strong one means we attract all kinds of stuff. So we have all the opportunity, and we're beautiful, and we just spin out on the illusion and the Maya and the projection of it all. So I already even talked about the most important things here. We need to elevate those things. But on the web class that I'm doing, part of it, one of them is this remedies and practices to elevate Venus. These are things you can do every day to connect and elevate Venus energy. But then you got to do them. I can tell you what they are, but then you got to do them. Functional nature Venus, like I said, as a ruler for each of the 12 signs. Evolutionary process of Venus. How do we evolve it from stimulation and sensuality through emotional desire to a higher devotional state? And what are things we can do? There are things we can do. So Venus in difficulty, and why certain sections of the sky are difficult as Venus moves through Leo and Virgo, but also Cancer. But I'll talk about why those things are more difficult. And again, the Venus 2020 for your sign and all signs. This includes the exalted transit in February and the retrograde cycle in the spring that I already talked about. So I just put the link in there one more time. And again, it's very easy. It's 2020 Venus, 2020venus.com. Pretty easy, right? Little vanity URL, and there it is. So it was good to see everybody here. And I hope you all have a great night, and you take